Hello. Hey, Terry.
Hi. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too shabby.
Not too shabby?
No, not too shabby. It's for me it's I don't know about you all, but it's the end of like our last semester, our last week of the semester. So final grades and
Yeah.
and all of that stuff. So
Do you have finals next week?
no, it was this week technically. And
Okay.
so most of my week has been we had most of our finals the week before, and I had I'm teaching four classes right now, so two of my classes the finals were last week, and then I have
Yeah.
two of my classes they were this week at the beginning of the week. So now it's all just uh, filling out the grades and
Yeah.
getting fielding emails from students and that whole thing. So
Yeah. All that
and
stuff.
meetings, lots of meetings. Awesome.
Yeah. I don't know anything about any of that.
No, you wouldn't, would you? You're never having to deal with any of that.
No, never.
Well,
Yeah. Our
lucky for
finals are
you.
next week. So this is the
Mm.
last week of classes. So we still have
So
another.
it's
Yeah.
so winter's coming.
Yes. We're supposed to get really bad weather here tomorrow night. So, yeah, it's probably
Really?
going to come down.
Well, I mean it's crazy right in Texas, in Denton, Texas right now. It's like it hit 81 degrees today.
Oh, man.
Randomly, it got really warm, so that was really strange. But I don't know, maybe we'll get some colder weather.
Yeah, we're supposed to get like tornadoes and horrible weather tomorrow, late tomorrow night.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's what they're
See.
saying, at least. But we'll see. It's Missouri. You never know what's
Right.
going to
It's
happen.
all over the place.
Yeah. Let me. So I don't know, because of the time that we're doing this in the semester, we'll see how many people come. Hopefully, some faculty are going to show up. Joshua's here, I see.
Hi,
Do you
Josh.
know? Yeah, there he is. And Leah's here. Cool, she's here. I think
Hi, Leah.
Hannah's
Hi,
gonna.
how are you doing?
I
Good. It's
think
good to see you.
Hannah's gonna.
Yeah.
Hannah's gonna try to zoom in as well. I think if she can. So
Okay. Well,
yeah,
that's fine. This can be an intimate conversation, and
I
I'm
just
all for that.
I went to Don Carlos last night, which is a
Hmm.
restaurant very near where the library is. So we revisited the library mural last night, and I was
Oh,
excited.
really?
Yeah, drove all the way to Jackson.
That's a far drive.
Yeah, it was an adventure. Yeah, for sure.
Well, it's great.
Yeah, I mean it's holding up great, and I have to say my favorite though is the Indie House mural that you did. I love that.
Yeah, definitely. That's my favorite too. I've got some interesting things though. Making this, I had to go through and find like try to dig up like all of the kind of mural-esque images that I've created, all the paintings I've created over the years. So it was fun to kind of do that. So I've got some things that I did that I never really talked about or showed people other than like if they were kind of local to a
Yeah,
certain area. So I think that'll be fun to
cool.
talk about.
Good. I'm excited. So maybe we'll get started. Maybe people will join in. I hope you don't mind I'm recording this, if that's okay.
Well, that's fine.
Okay, cool. And I'll send this to you if you want to have the recording. So
Okay, that'd be great.
I'm gonna do a little introduction and then just turn it over to you, and I'll share the screen with you, or you can share the screen.
Okay.
So I mean, everybody knows you, so I'm going to introduce you anyway. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the final After Hours Conversations on Art and Culture presentation. Our speaker is artist and educator Terry Davis, who uses the process of printmaking and its related concepts to direct the ideas of his creative process. In 2020, Davis received an MFA in printmaking from Ohio University and a visual arts management certificate. He received his BFA from Southeast Missouri State University in 2017. Davis is currently employed at the School of Art and Design at the University of North Texas as an adjunct instructor in the Department of Studio Art, where he teaches courses in printmaking and foundations. 4 courses, right? The life of an
Yeah,
adjunct, right? Yeah,
yeah, that's the life.
yeah. In his lecture, Outside Inside, Davis will discuss his view of public art in the form of murals, as well as the history of his practice with the subject. Davis has been making artwork for public space since before he could handle a paintbrush properly. His public mural work has been made for fun, in collaboration with friends, and as commissions for various institutions, both public and private. The talk will recount how Davis got started making public work. It will clarify his conceptual motivations and cite some realizations he made about the process along the way. He will also dispense some practical knowledge for all of those interested in the pursuit of creating public work of their own design. So thank you so much, Terry, for joining us tonight. I'm very excited to hear your talk. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
So let's see.
Okay.
Okay.
I can share my screen and I'll do this. How about that? Can you see that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Joni, for the introduction. I'm going to try to hit all those points. I don't know how connected this is going to be, but I think it'll be interesting regardless. So I wanted to start off this talk by reading something that I wrote a couple years ago when I was thinking a lot more about this this topic. I haven't really been able to do a good public mural since the start of COVID. Actually, it's funny because I started teaching. I taught a special topics class in this concept right as COVID began. So we had this whole thing planned with my students where I had met with two different entities and we were, I worked on this curriculum to essentially create an institutional version of like a public mural experience. And it kind of fell to pieces. So I've been riding the waves of that ever since. But looking back, I think there's plenty of things to talk about. So I want to start with this little paragraph that I wrote. And it goes, art is a product of culture that defines and challenges the voice of the people. It sets taste, grants autonomy, and provides a platform for public speech that is essential to any healthy democracy. Public art is an extension of these ideas with an emphasis on the collective. It holds democratic societies together and dictates how people interact and communicate with one another, while also developing their sense of community and connectedness. So that was long-winded, but the basic idea here is that public art helps to develop the identity of public space. I think that's essential to any kind of space. Any production of culture is some form of presence of public art. I just happen to be really interested in murals. So that's one of the reasons why, again, I think public murals is important. But I didn't really start my career as a public muralist with these concepts in mind. I just wanted to make images that I thought were quote unquote cool. Like that was my beginning. I think everybody's beginning is kind of that, right? You're like, oh, I just want to make something that's cool, which is fine. I think that's a fine place to start. However, after a while, you start to realize that there's something more to your work than the aesthetic. So your art has a particular voice, and the longer you work in any artistic pursuit, the more you wonder what it is that you're actually trying to say. As a public muralist, I make work that is an extension of me, but it's also an extension of the community. When you make work for the public domain, it's no longer just about you, but a collective us. With that being said, I'm in no way an expert. If I really think about this, going back and looking at the work that I've made, I've only really been doing public work in the public space since 2017. So I haven't been doing this for a very long time. I'm really just scratching the surface of the possibility of work like this. And my experience is my own. It's a little limited, but I think there's still stuff there to talk about. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about my public art practice. So I've got an outline because this is how I do everything. I make an outline for these things. I don't think, I'm going to kind of stick to this outline. It's not going to be this rigorous or structured. It's actually going to be kind of loose, but things I'm going to talk about is just how I got started in work like this. My first big project, murals, continued after that, the Indie House project, and some practical advice. So let's get started. So I got started. Let's get started. I got started. I got started essentially by just cultivating an interest within like the public art arena. And I didn't even realize that I was doing that. But I grew up in a small rural area, which really doesn't have this type of work. So whenever I would go to more urban areas, larger cities like St. Louis or Chicago, I would be exposed to work like this, and it was jarring aesthetically. It was stuff that I didn't understand, but I really liked, and I was just very interested in. So mostly I saw a lot of graffiti. So this is actually an image from St. Louis, the graffiti wall, the kind of publicly sanctioned graffiti wall, and so I saw a lot of stuff like this. I also saw I also saw this. I lived really close to train tracks too, growing up, even in the rural area where I lived, and so I saw a lot of graffiti on train tracks. I like to call them moving gallery shows, and that really sparked my interest. I didn't necessarily take a direct part in any urban graffiti scene. Like I didn't make work within these spaces. I didn't meet people within these spaces. Most of the time, I meet them after the fact. But what I saw from the outside really inspired me. So I was interested in these things, and when I was younger, even this was even before I went to art school, I was trying to just consume as much kind of culture specific to street art or public art as possible. And so I found books like this. So these are a few books that I had before I even started art school, before I even knew that that's what I wanted to do. The things that I bought to entertain me that I was interested in. Books like Street Knowledge by King Ads, The Street Sketchbook, Inside the Journals of International Street and Graffiti Artists by Tristan Manco, and Banksy One Piece, published by Century. So this is kind of where I started. But after I kind of saturated my stuff with that, myself with those things, I realized also too, I guess, that street art wasn't the only art form, and it wasn't the only one that I was interested in. I can't say that I went to art school because I was like, I want to do like large public murals. Again, I wasn't really acclimated to that language yet, but I was interested in the arts. I was interested in making the quote unquote cool image. So I went to school for it. And I decided while studying at SEMO, I was actually studying for a bachelor's of science in business, which I'm so glad I didn't finish, that I would switch tracks my sophomore year. So I was kind of like a super senior, I guess, but I switched tracks and I decided that I was going to pursue this art thing because all I really was doing was drawing in my business classes anyways. I think the one thing that maybe I learned from business school was just how to public speak, public speech just in general, and giving presentations and writing like decent emails. Like I learned that from business school. I didn't learn much else because I wasn't really interested in, concepts of business. But I had to go through that and figure it out. But when I made the switch, when I decided to go to school, SEMO's art program at the River campus, I discovered a community of artists, instructors, and like-minded students, all interested in the same thing that I was interested in. So, it was a good place for me to learn. And when I went to SEMO at the time I was there was no mural specific course that I could take. I think that's kind of a rare class at any art program. But I did take advantage of my instructor's knowledge and their general willingness to let me experiment. And I think the instructors at SEMO do a good job of, letting their students essentially do whatever they want to do and kind of express themselves visually. So to this day, actually, because I wasn't trained, I didn't go to a muralist workshop. I've never gone to one. To do this, I generally use the same procedures that I learned from school planning a fine art piece. So the stuff that I learned in my fine art painting classes, printmaking classes, and sculpture classes, I use that today to plan out these murals. And one of the very first things I started with was the first really large work. here's me wearing like questionable attire. I thought this image was so funny. Uh, but this is like one of the first times I started making like large work, and it was in a Hannah Sanders screen printing course, introductory screen printing course, and Hannah had this end assignment um, that where you could essentially do anything you wanted as long as it involved some form of screen. So I decided that I was going to construct this 8 foot by 8 foot panel and paint on it, draw on it, and screen print it on it. So that's what I did. That's kind of what the process looked like for me. This was in Catapult. This was when things were really new in Catapult. So I left some stains on the floor that are probably still there. Um, and here's some of that process. So, I drew a really large portrait. And then I decided like, what would happen if I screen printed over that thing? And so that's what I did. And it was fairly successful. I got a lot of, I think, praise for this work. And, it was, I think, opening the door to really go larger. I think this work, I cite this as being like my intro into stuff like this because it's a different way of working. When you make something so large, when you go so big, your body behaves differently. Like when you're doing a drawing or a painting that is a manageable scale, that you can see all of. That's another thing that you can see within your field of vision. You're using like your wrist motion a lot. You're not really going from the elbow or from the shoulder. And when you do something really large, that all changes. One thing, something very small has a completely different approach. You have to have a completely different approach to it when you go big. And doing a project like this, it kind of put me in the position to learn that firsthand. So it took a little bit of the fear away from me doing things large. And going into it, I wasn't sure how it was going to work, but I also wasn't really worried about it because I was just encouraged to try it. And I'm glad that I did because that eventually led me to other things. And after that, that started going around, and like the teachers were like, "Hey, this guy can do some bigger stuff." And one of the people that saw that was Professor Justin Miller, and who I worked with very closely in other courses, in his painting courses. And he had this project that came up where he did the solo show at the Arts Council, and he was, I was really interested in helping him, and he let me help him. I was probably way too interested in helping him. I was like, "Oh, I'm your guy. I'll do whatever you want." And so he threw me in. He let me come kind of see what it was like to do something at this scale. And I saw every bit of the process that he worked on from start to finish. He's very generous with showing me the things that he would do. He was also very generous at letting me try things on his piece, which blew my mind at the time. There's actually, so I'm going to take my little cursor here. This skull, all of the line work in this skull, I did that. So he had a version of this that he had kind of mocked up, and he let me kind of go against the grain. And I remember kind of going to this, and he was, I was like, "Well, how do you want this line work to be?" And he was like, "I trust you, do it." And I was like, "Oh my God, like what a honor. Like I've got to like do really well on this." And I felt a little pressure. Also, I knew that, this was going to represent Justin's work and that people were going to see it. So I took it very seriously, and it was a good experience. But I think this is something that really kind of got me realizing that, yeah, I could maybe do this. So instead of taking baby steps to, after this, you think the next thing maybe would be a smaller step, and I would build those steps. I didn't take baby steps, and I went straight for a really large work. So this was the first major mural project that I had been a part of, the first one that I did on my own. And that first project was for this building, Riverside Regional Library. We kind of talked about it at the beginning of the talk here. But at Riverside, essentially, I got this gig through the grapevine of the people who I had met through the school. So I think someone on the board, if I remember the story right, somebody on the library board who knew Chris Wubina asked Chris if there was anybody within the art department that would be interested in taking on this job. And Chris asked Justin, And Justin was like, well, Terry could try it. I'll ask him. And he asked me, and I was like, yeah, I definitely want to do this, not really knowing what I was getting myself into. It was a process. So once I was committed to it, essentially I went to the space, Riverside Regional Library, not really knowing, again, not really knowing the procedure. And I went in, I talked to the director, Jeff Trinkle, and we began to kind of discuss the procedure, how this thing would get done. The first thing we discussed, I think, was expectations. So what they wanted on the wall of this space. This is where like it becomes a collective us, I think. It was no longer necessarily about me and my personal practice as an artist, but it was more about, you know, what this place stood for within the community. And of course, I could still kind of, you know, put some of myself in there, and myself, I think, is in there quite a bit. But, you know, that's the first time I realized that, oh, I need to make something that is not just about me. Like this has alternate meetings. I have to talk to people. I have to work with the community to kind of develop ideas. I have to listen as much as I can to figure out something that they're going to be happy with. You know, because I knew that once I made this thing, I'd be long gone, and it would exist without me, and it's still there today. So anyways, I went through the process of doing that after meeting with the board members and Jeff, and kind of getting some ideas about what they wanted. I started figuring stuff out. So this is something that I made right away. You know, I use the same general procedure that I would with any other project, like I was taught at school. And first thing I did was sketch. So this was something that I did. I went to, you know, the site. I took measurements. I made essentially like a box, a ratio for like what the space was supposed to be. This space in particular was kind of odd because like the actual surface area, actually after I'd measured it out and kind of did the math, was a little skewed and strange. Like there was this slope that happened here, so it tapered. It had this tapered from left to right. There was a door in here, so I had to consider all these things in the work, like when I was creating the composition. And to do that, another thing that I did was I went out within the Jackson community and I looked for specific landmarks that were important to the area. And I had conversations with locals to, you know, about the things that they thought were important about the area. And so I did that research. I tried to, you know, pick as many things that I could to represent the spaces that I was trying to, you know, to talk about. And then I developed this drawing. So this was like the sketch. There's a lot of sketches before this, tons of sketches. I couldn't even tell you. I was doing this while I was also finishing or making the work, finishing the work for my thesis show. This is my last semester of undergrad. So kind of secretly, I'm doing this project on the side that a few people know about, and I'm making it work. But this was the final sketch that I produced, the final concept sketch. And essentially I went in front of the board members and I pled my case. I was like, this is why I think this will work. And, you know, I tried to sell it. Say, and I left some things open. Actually, I did this strategically. I don't know why I thought of this, but I almost kind of wanted them to put some of themselves in there, like the board members. I wanted it to feel like they could also have opinions and make changes and have suggestions. So there were certain things like, you know, I left the characters kind of ambiguous. I left this huge space here open, and we had discussions about what could be in that space, stuff like that. And I think they really like that. You know, that was a good thing about, you know, the practice end of it, like leaving space open for conversation with your client, having places where they can interject some ideas, you know, so they can feel like they're a part of it, because ultimately they are a part of it. If you're not listening to the people who are commissioning the work, especially for public spaces, you're not going to get the job. It's just not, it's not going to happen. You know, you got to listen. So I did that. That was approved. And then I made this digital mock-up of what I thought it should look like. And I did this for a couple reasons. One, just to prove that, you know, what was possible in the work. Also, because I had never done something so large before, and I had a specific budget. I had to figure out like what's gonna be what kind of colors I'm gonna use, like what kind of budget do I have for colors, and you know, how are these things gonna work at a larger scale. So I spent really just as much time, I think, on all of the preliminary work as I did the mural, leading up to it. It's about a half and half. I spent a lot of time doing research about the area, a lot of time sketching, drawing, a lot of time in, meeting with the committee, the board members, and doing this final render. And once I had finished this render and, I've made adjustments and we talked about it, it was good to go. So after that, I got busy, and that's this next thing. So here's some shots from that process. This was the summer of 2017, and I learned a lot of things the hard way with this project, and I really mean the hard way, because I also decided when I was doing this that I was also going to work for Chris Wubina as a fabricator, student fabricator on his roundabout project. So what I would do, which is dumb, so dumb. I don't do this now because I'm much more responsible with my time now that I've learned these lessons. But what I would do is I would, in the morning, I would go work with like stainless steel welding and stuff like that all day. And in the afternoon, like at 3, I would leave that job and I would come to the wall to work on the mural. And I think that's why it probably took so long. Like it took me probably about a month and a half to do this job. And I had the time to do it. Like I discussed this in advance, how long it would take. But I was kind of burning the candle at both ends. My grandmother would like to say that. Anyways, you can see some of the process here. Like I did not grid this. I wish I would have gridded this out. Honestly, it was confusing for me because of that taper. I had no idea how to even make a grid because it tapered in such a weird way. I was really afraid of spending the time and making this grid for this thing and then not working. So what I did is I freehanded everything by like cite. I cited this entire wall, which was dumb. So it took a long time. Like I think just the line work itself took like a week and a half or 2 weeks. And you can kind of see like in this left image, the ghosting of the images underneath. So what I would do is, because you can't see things up close, you can't see the entirety of this huge wall when you're up close on it. So I would run all the way back and like say, oh, the head of this figure like intersects with this pole. And I'd run back over and I'd make a mark, be like, it's right there. And then I would try to find these landmarks to kind of create this image. And it was so frustrating. But eventually I got it. It worked out. I had a lot of support too. Sometimes Justin would come over. I'd work at night sometimes, which was also interesting because you don't realize at night, if you've got lights on, bugs love to get into paint and do all these weird things. That's another thing, that you kind of learn on the job. But he'd come over and encourage me and be like, "You're doing great." I'd be like, "I don't know what I'm doing," but eventually I persevered. I worked through it. Here's some details of it. Some nice things in the work happened, and I think part of it is because I got to spend so much time on it. That's not really a luxury that I always have. I think this is the one project that I had tons of time to work on with, and I haven't had that much time since on mural projects if I've ever asked to do them. Usually it's like a week, 2 weeks tops, but this one I had like a month and a half, which I needed. Anyways, this is the final piece as it ended up working. Everything from this door jamb over, I had planned. Everything from the door jamb to the right, I actually had not planned. And that was something in hindsight that I should have just stood my ground on. I was kind of like, I was maybe overly like nice and willing to do anything because I was like, oh, I get to paint this wall. And the director had this idea of like, oh, what if we had this quote up here? And I was like, sure, let's do this quote. So I added this like silly, this is like the one thing I really actually don't like about this mural at all, if I'm being honest. I added this silly quote at the end. And I kind of wish this is something for maybe those of you who are going to do work like this, stick with your guns, like this was something I did way after the planning process. This was like a month into the execution of this. I should have said no, I think, to that top section. Otherwise, I really like this mural. I think it still stands up, from what I did all those years ago. And the paint has stood up, which is good. That was the first time that I'd used an outdoor paint, so I didn't know what it would do, but it seemed to have worked out. So that's awesome. All right, so after this, right after this, I I went to graduate school. So I got into grad school at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, into the print program there, for printmaking, but I was still really interested in pursuing murals. And so I did. I pursued a few opportunities at the beginning of grad school, and I was rejected a lot. So a lot, all many times. I think I've got more rejections than I have actual murals completed, and that's pretty normal. This was one project here that was like a rejection. So this project was for I had two major projects that I was rejected from. One was with the city of Athens. So there was this really like terrible little wall here. I think before it had some kind of the mural had a weird mosaic in it, and it was just really confusing. And they wrote a grant to go over it. So I created this concept, which was I don't even know what's going on in this concept. It was something to do with I mean, I can see why I got rejected. Something to do with like the charcoal, the coal industry and the brick industry within the area. I thought I was being really clever. I did like research on the town's origins, and I thought this was kind of interesting, but it didn't really make it. Another one that I had attempted to do was a project in Cleveland called Rooms to Let, which they have every year in Slavic Village, where essentially artists can have these proposals to create like a public piece within a house that's going to be demolished. And it's a big festival, and it's kind of what's nice about that project, I think, is that it's a way of reclaiming spaces for the locals, like within the community. They get to like reclaim these spaces that are about to be demolished out of their control for like a week. They get to have fun, enjoy artwork, and see these spaces before they're permanently gone. And I was really kind of bummed out on that one, but it didn't stop me from continuing to do it anyways. So, it was okay. It was okay to be rejected. And, while I was being rejected, in between rejections, I was still like doing stuff for fun. And I can't emphasize how important that is, even if it's stupid. Like this image, I think in my opinion, is pretty dumb as far as images, but it wasn't meant to be anything like it's a fun image. It's not meant to be anything profound. It's not meant to be something that is kind of founded on some kind of conceptual basis. I was going out for fun, just like trying different things. And sometimes doing things for fun, that would work its way into my graduate work. So even though I didn't necessarily have sanctioned walls, I didn't have like professional projects that I was doing, I was still doing a lot of large scale kind of murals. At this time, I was doing a lot of indoor murals, actually. And so this piece is one of those things. I don't even remember if I've titled it, but I made this as part of my graduate work when I was thinking about murals in my work. And I made this knowing that it would be painted over. So I did this in like a few days. It critiqued, and then I painted over it. And I kind of liked that. That's something that I was really interested in is this, making something that was truly ephemeral, that wouldn't last for very long, as just kind of a practice or as an exercise. So I did stuff like that. Here's a little detail of that image. The other thing I did while I was in graduate school is I did murals with friends. In graduate school, I had peers who also liked painting large scale. So I had a friend named Andrew McNamara, who's a great artist. And we met. He was, an amazing painter, and we both like painting large scale murals. We kind of, right away bonded over that. And we kind of had this like mural troupe almost at this institution where we didn't necessarily get permission, because we did a lot of these things within this building that they gave us a studio space that nobody cared about. So a lot of the things that we did was just an effort to make the space a bit more palatable, to be a bit more interesting, to kind of put some things up that we were thinking about, like in our own work. And so these were collaborative pieces, these next few pieces between me and Andrew. And we wouldn't plan these. That was the kind of interesting thing about it. We didn't put a lot of thought into this work. We were really focused on just working together and kind of talking to each other and just having some kind of collaboration. So we did that a couple times. A few of these actually are still in that building, which is cool. But yeah, we created these images, and we would do them in a night. So that was the fun part of it. We would basically come in, we'd maybe do a little planning, like we're going to do this, maybe these colors, whatever. And then we would come in, and then one night we would just make the mural. And we didn't do it for a grade, like it wasn't, they weren't projects that we did for anything other than our own enjoyment. And I thought that was important. It was important to keep that going. I think that is just a lesson for anybody in any art pursuit. No matter what you do, you still got to make work for you and make work that's fun. Because it does, even in the moment, if it doesn't feel like it's really anything, it does inform your work. It does go somewhere. So, and this is one that we made. Let me go back. Oh, there we go. This is another one. So you can see we're working in, like, this was before this building had an abatement. Actually, but they saved this. They did an abatement in this building. So an abatement is where they go in and they scrape off lead paint. That's lead paint. We didn't know that when we were working in here, by the way. But lots of lead paint in here. And when I went and did the abatement, the workers actually liked this so much. They weren't told to save this, but they saved these images and a couple other murals, which was fun. Anyways, so that was a thing while I was in school. But while I was in school doing this work, people noticed. And I didn't realize that people noticed, but I think in communities like this, you'll get noticed for those things without realizing it. So after doing work like that for a period of time, it got around that I was interested in doing these things and I had some experience with it. And I got asked to do commissioned projects for the university that I got paid for. So two of those projects are these. One for a place called the Create Space, which is a School of Art and Design sanctioned space. It's essentially where they have all their new technologies, like their laser cutters, their Epson large format printer, stuff like that. So I did this one. And then this other project here was a wayfinding project. There's a bit of graphic design in there, I guess, where they wanted like a better way of telling people what floor they were on. So we did that, which was fun. I came to this project as I was asked to come into it because they'd given it to somebody else. And that person was overwhelmed because there were like 5 floors to deal with. So I came in and I did 2 of the floors and I kind of helped with the concepts. So this was like, and this will happen. I wanted to put this in here because this is what I inherited. I think they asked me to do this work because it was way cheaper than getting someone to come in and like just make the space better, which is something that happens. If you've worked in academia long enough, that's a thing. But for me, I didn't care. Like I was going to get paid to do this and my work was going to be on the wall for a long time. So I thought it was a pretty good gig. But this room was disgusting. It was absolutely disgusting. The carpet was really gross. There were like these pipes had burst at one time and they cleaned up the pipes, but like there was stuff on the wall. So the very first thing I had to do was deal with that, which is something nobody really talks about. I think when they talk about like public work is how messy it can be. And this is one of those circumstances. So I had to build that into the budget I was given. So I've got a few student workers who assisted me. They got paid by the school to help me do the work and prep the space. So together over a period of 2 days, I think we prepped the space. We scraped old adhesive off the wall and painted it back to something that would work like as a canvas. So that's what some of this work was. And then after that, I just went to town. So this work that I created, and I'm going to go through the final images here. I made this thinking about, really loosely. I wasn't given a lot of time actually to work on this. I was given maybe 2 weeks from start to finish, like coming up with the design and implementing it. Like it was over a break. But I wanted to kind of make something that seemingly would like stimulate an idea of like creation in a space because it was a creative space. So I thought of this really kind of campy idea of, a person cutting out animals or creating these origami figures and them coming to life and moving and going across the room. So that's what the space ended up looking like after. And then this is how it's used now. So there's a bunch of stuff in the space. I think it worked out pretty well. I like this one. The other project that I talked about in the beginning, this was kind of like the sketch phase for it. So the wayfinding thing, I was really the only thing I was giving. They were like, well, we need better wayfinding, but we want it to be artsy. And there actually had been an old wayfinding project, like public like mural project done by another artist. And it had failed because the artist had used, they had printed out large format paper and they had used wheat paste, like an organic wheat paste, to paste it to the wall, and it only lasted about a year because wheat paste is an ephemeral thing. It's susceptible to decay. So literally over the course of a year, everyone watched as this really quite awesome installation mural work was just started to get like mold on it. So part of the reason for them doing this project was to kind of take care of these things. So for this, I started, making, I thought a lot about with this, I wanted to do something in this project that was important for the students because it's like, who's the audience here? I'm not so much interested in the teachers. I'm interested in the students. The students come in here every day. A lot of the students that went to this school had rural backgrounds, which is something that I'm very familiar with. And it was important for me to like look at some of the culture around Ohio and try to extract that and make it into something that felt a bit more contemporary, a bit reimagined. So I focused on quilt patterns, quilt blocks, because like the quilt barn paintings and quilting as a concept is huge in Ohio. It's like a fabric of kind of the folk culture, the local culture there. So I worked with another artist on this, and we kind of created a series of sketches and concepts, and we ended up with this where we used quilt patterns that were local to the state of Ohio, that were specific for the state, and even stitch patterns. I went as far as to delve into like specific stitching patterns. So some of these patterns in here were taken from these kind of local craft concepts, which I really liked. And then I painted it. So I did this over the summer, one summer, I think it was 2018, might have been 2019, but I worked with another student. I had two floors, they had two floors, and we went through and painted these things. So these are just some details. And that was an interesting challenge because I had never painted on, if you look at this image on the right, these cinder block walls. I don't know if you can appreciate this, but it is really hard to paint straight, clean lines on a cinder block wall. You can't even put tape on it because even if you tape out a line, the walls are porous. So you don't get a straight line. You just get, a bunch of junk. So I had to basically learn, this painting, it doesn't look like there's a lot going on. This probably took me 24 working hours, I think. Even like after all the planning, it took me a long time to do it. And it's really not that big. It's not that, and it's pretty graphic, but it took a long time. And most of it was just figuring out how the materials would work on this space, which is an interesting part that you kind of find out firsthand, whatever the project is. It doesn't seem to matter how much experience you have, there's always something new to deal with. Okay, and that brings us, I think, to the last thing I wanted to talk about, which was something I think many of you are aware of, especially the people in this group. This is the final project that I completed. I haven't done anything after this because of the pandemic. I haven't really been able to. But this is the mural that's on the side of the Indie House. And this one feels like, out of all of the murals that I completed, this feels like the direction I want that work to go. This is the one that I think is maybe the most successful at doing the things that I'm interested in. So this project had two components. One component was pretty straightforward, and that's what I was commissioned for by Lori Everett, who runs the Indie House, who's an amazing person who cares very much about her community. And I really vibed off of that. She really cares about her community. So when we had those conversations, a lot of what I was thinking about was like the aesthetics that she was interested in and what was in her store, stuff like that. But she was so open to things. What ended up happening after we had conversations and we went back and forth and we talked about what potentially could go here, I suggested that we also do a letterpress print component because I had this idea that wouldn't it be cool if, public art has to stay in that place. It can't move. Wouldn't it be cool if there was something to like a printed piece of ephemera that could go into the homes of, locals within the community? And wouldn't it also be cool if a project like that could also fund arts education and like do stuff like that? So, because it's Lori, we did that. And these are the finished products. So this is the finished mural. This is the finished letterpress print that we ended up making. This is how they started. So again, even before this, there's tons of other drawings and prep work that I'm not going to show you because it's boring. But we have a conversation. So, Lori essentially had an idea. She gave me kind of like a Pinterest board, almost an interest board of things that she thought were really interesting to her. And then it was my job essentially to extract the things that I thought could work, or just to show her like what she envisioned. Like, so something I think that's really hard about creatives working with people outside of their specific industry. Like, I think everybody's a bit creative, but you don't often know how things actually work. Like if you haven't done them before, if you don't have that experience, I think that's a general thing. I think some of the hardest things to do within those situations is just to show exactly how their idea would work. Like if you actually made it, what would it work? What would it do? So a lot of the times I show things that don't work on purpose. Like I take exactly what that person tells me and I make it happen. And then, we have a conversation about it. And oftentimes it's like, oh, I didn't know it was going to look like that. I'm not really interested in that. And then we have a critical discussion. And I think that's the most difficult part of work like this, because I have to kind of crawl inside the brain of the person or the persons who, I'm thinking about for this work. And we have to try to extract as much truth as we can, or as much authenticity as we can. And this is kind of what that looked like. So Lori was great because at every step of the way, she knew that things would change, they would grow, they would develop. So this, the initial sketches, the initial concepts changed quite a bit. I think the painting changed a lot from here to what it became. And the print changed as well, I think, in the color palette and all that stuff. But what was nice about it, doing those in tandem, the processes informed each other. So constantly I wasn't necessarily thinking like, how can I make this letterpress print version look exactly like the painting and vice versa? I wasn't interested in that. I was more interested in how the materials would dictate the end results, the images, the aesthetics. And that's what I did. But here are some shots from the process of creating the poster. So I worked directly with Catapult, with Hannah at the time, who's running that space, and with Lori and the students. And essentially I created these laser cut blocks. We brought them in and we printed them. This was about a month before the actual mural. So this is a kind of way to promote the mural, but also, starting to get these things out there. These are parts of the process. This is like my favorite shot. So this is like the shot that every printmaker loves to see, like when the print actually works, because sometimes it doesn't, which can be, you gotta work with what you got. But this was when I saw this after like an intensive week of printing, I was like, we made it. Everything's gonna be okay. I learned a lot on this project too, but it was nice to go through these steps, to have conversations with the students, to be there, to provide them a platform to see what it's like to do something like this. And, I learned a lot from it. I'm not going to say that I came in like knowing all this stuff was going to be perfect. I didn't know. And I think that's the important thing, is that you're not going to know, but it's okay not to know, and allow yourself, the ability and the space to kind of correct yourself and to make new decisions. Like, that's okay. I think I learned a lot from that project, and in those terms. But here's what the mural started to look like in its construction. So I gridded it out this time because I learned from my past mistakes. So I gridded it, but something else happened, and I used chalk. Like, chalk is a really great thing to use when you're doing murals because it washes away and it doesn't affect your paint. But I ran into this huge problem that I didn't know was going to be a thing, which is that our lift was not high enough to get this top section right up here, which is like where this really ornate lettering was. So at some point, what I was doing, I had to make an even tighter grid because I could not see anything. Because essentially what I would do is I got this ladder. Jeff over there at, Jeff's a great guy at, what is it? I'm forgetting the company, creative company with the newspaper. Russ Media, at Russ Media, the director, Jeff from Russ Media, who's awesome, like was watching me do this and he realized my issue and he was trying to help me like figure out a way to do this. So we ended up going to the Southeast Missourians basement and we grabbed this like 25-foot, 23-foot ladder and we brought it over. And yeah, so at some point I was like, one-handing, I've got this terrible video where it's me taking a video of like how high up I was and how close I was to the wall and how scary it was to do this. But I was for a day hugging, because I thought I was going to have to finish the mural this way. But I was hugging this ladder, painting like within an inch of my nose because I was so close to the wall, trying to get this thing figured out. Luckily, a higher power intervened, and we were able to get Gary Rust actually was kind enough to donate a better lift, a lift that could get us the height. And he did that, and it saved the day, and it was an amazing thing. But that is not something that I thought would be an issue. Actually, the thing that did it was like we had done all the math, right? What we didn't account for was the steepness of the hill next to this building. So you can't see this in the photo, but the building itself is on a hill that then connects to the street. And the hill's a tiny hill, very tiny hill, but it was so steep that we actually couldn't get the lift up onto that hill to get that height. And that was the issue. And none of us could have prepared for that. And, we got lucky and things worked out, but that's the kind of thing that happens on jobs like this. And I think it makes it even more nerve wracking sometimes because this is in the public space, this is going to exist long after I leave. People are going to see this. And it's also a reflection of Lori and her businesses and the businesses within the indie house, so that's a little nerve wracking. So I'm glad it worked out. But yeah, it was a little nerve wracking for a little bit. And so at the end of this though, the mural was a success. I think it looks really, really great. It's nice in all seasons. And it's a point of interest for a lot of people. So I think that's what's really nice about this is that it creates, there's a visual striking, it's a visual striking image. Like people come up and they want to take photos next to it. They're interested in the story. They're interested in the space. It kind of creates a meeting point. When I'm around Cape, oftentimes when I drive in this area, I'll see people kind of standing around it, having conversations. And I think that's a powerful thing. I think that's what public art should do. It should allow for a public space to develop, to be a place for conversation, for discussion, even if it's just a simple photo op opportunity, that's fine. But I think it can be even more powerful than that at times. That's what makes it so exciting. Anyways, I think I'm way over time here, but I will put up, before I kind of turn over for questions, I'm going to put up this because I think it's maybe helpful for all of you that are interested in doing murals, like pricing. How do you price a mural? And I've got way more stuff like this. If you're interested, I don't think I have time to really go through it all, but if you're interested, contact me. I'll give you all the information you could ever want. But this is something that I came up with a year ago or so, a couple years ago. It's a pricing guide. So I price murals by the square footage. So rough like average price, 25 per square foot. And this gives you kind of an idea of what prices are. So at 160 square foot, it's 4,000, etc. This is a basic pricing guide. What's really nice about this is, you can set it however you want to. I think when I started, I did stuff really cheaply. I didn't follow a guide this strict, but it's also nice because if you have these things available and you talk about these things with clients up front, you'll know if they're serious or not too. Because again, your time is valuable. That's so important. Like it's okay, I think, to do things for free if you're really interested in getting something out of it through learning about the process. That's fine. You're getting paid in knowledge, but there's a limit, I think, to how much you want to do that. Do it enough to get the experience and the idea of how to do something, but don't let it become your thing. It's important because if if you start yourself out really low, you'll be kind of stuck in that. It's kind of a contractor story I hear from private contractors where they're known for being the person that does it fast and does it really cheap, and then that's the reputation, and they can't get out of that. Be careful not to kind of put yourself in that position. Um, okay. I also have resources too at the end here. So websites for mural opportunities. I think local is better. Like start local. That's what I've done. I really haven't ventured too much outside of the local places, like the places that I go, because I'm really interested in local communities and investing myself in those communities. But for mural opportunities, there are things that you can look at. Callforentry.org, forculturalistings.org, Americans for the Arts.org. These are all really good places to look at if you're interested. Anyways, I will leave it there. Let's open up for some questions.
Terry, thank you so much. I have tons of questions. I'm just going to ask you one thing to get it started.
Sure.
One of the things that I really appreciate is your commitment to the community. But I guess what I wanted to ask you, and you and I had talked about this a little bit a long time ago when you were working on the library mural. So as you're working on a project like this, obviously people are going to be curious. They're going to come up and talk to you and whatnot. And so I was just wondering, because sometimes people don't know what's going on, or they're curious and so on. How do you deal with that? I mean, because in a sense, maybe you might be considered an outsider. You're coming into the community, you're painting this thing on this building. What's going on? I'm not sure what's happening. How do you deal with that kind of reception, or just any kind of reception of the public as you're working?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, it's funny because it makes me think about that first job I did at Riverside. And when I threw up those initial lines, when I was trying to, the community didn't know what was going on, and they thought the library had been vandalized because there was caution tape like around to keep people out of the space. There was caution tape around it, and there were really, there were cones and stuff. And yeah, people thought it had been vandalized. And I had to talk to people about that. They'd come up and they'd be like, oh my goodness, it's not vandalism. It's it's an art thing. And we would talk about that. But yeah, I would say it's kind of tough sometimes, because when you're doing the work in a public space, you've got to be on it. You have to be attentive. You can't, I talk about any kind of artistic process as a thinking process. And I really do believe that it's not something that, you can just really do automatically. You can, I'll rephrase that. You can do it automatically, but if you're doing something really specific, you have to think through every bit of the process. You're having an inner dialogue the whole time. If my head was open and you could hear my thoughts when I'm working on drawing or painting, you're gonna hear me be like, no, this line goes here. No, that goes back. Okay, this line, okay, thin to thick. It would be this whole conversation in my head. And it's hard to do that when you're getting interrupted by people, but I think it's also important not to listen to them and hear their stories. So I don't think that I've gotten better. I've gotten a lot better at this, but I learned that at that first mural was that I had to have conversations with people. And in the beginning, it was a chore. I had to be like, oh, here's this person's coming. I've got to have a conversation. But the longer that I did stuff like that, the more it became an asset to me. Like it became interesting, because the cool thing about that is that people come up and you're doing a good job. Like that you've tapped into maybe the culture of the area when they start telling you stories, like specific stories relating to the subject matter. And that's a beautiful, powerful thing. That's what makes public art, again, so important, is these conversations. And I got told so many stories relating to some of the subjects that I had picked, some of the images that I picked to kind of include within the mural. I had no idea the context. I'm happy that I got something that worked, because the opposite's also true. Sometimes you'll get somebody that comes up that just hates it, and you got to deal with that conversation. Um, and there's some truth in there too. And when somebody doesn't like something, there's a reason, whether they can articulate it or not. Some people are really good at articulating why they don't like something. Others just like hurl insults at you. Um, but ultimately it builds a tougher skin, I think. I remember when I came into the arts, I was like a shut-in, which I know is kind of surprising. I at first I didn't really want to talk to people. I didn't want to develop community. But community is like all we've got in the arts. It's like one of the most important things that we have. It's a thing that nobody can really take away from us. And it's what really improves your growth. Like, you don't grow as quickly without community. I could give you a list of all these technical books on how to do certain things, and it won't really mean anything if you don't have someone to talk to about it, who's had similar experiences or had some kind of insight into those processes. So I really actually enjoy those conversations, good or bad, when I'm painting. And I found some ways to kind of like, to do both at the same time, or to be nice and be like, oh, thank you. We've been talking for 30 minutes. I better get back to this, stuff like that.
Hey, Terry, can you stop sharing your screen so people can see your whole face?
Yes, I
Great.
can.
I don't
How
have an answer.
about that?
If there's something else I can help with.
Was that Siri?
Yeah, sorry, that was Siri.
Siri's getting wise over there.
Yeah, she's getting crazy. Any other questions for Terry?
I think there's maybe a lot in the chat. There's like 35 things in the
These
Yeah.
are just comments. Everyone's saying hi to Maria, and then how amazing you are, and Hannah is excited about the print. So yeah, it's all kind of commentary there.
I love
Maria says, "Oh my God."
I love Hannah's hi Terry, I'm late to class, don't give me an F. I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare give you a failing grade.
Hannah's got a question. Let's see. She says, do you miss us, and when are you coming to visit?
Yes, I very much miss you. Yeah, and I don't know when I can visit. I know, well, I am gonna be in town for like a very short period of time. So I think I'm gonna try to like run around and see who I can meet. But that's the weird thing about, that's not the weird thing. It's kind of the sucky thing about going off and like finding a career path, is that, now I'm in Texas and I'm building a whole new community, and that's nice. I like the people in the place I'm in, but that's also the hard thing about building community, I guess, is that there's a lot of people that get left behind, or that you don't get to talk to as much, and you miss those conversations. Especially the ones that were so informative, that helped you build yourself to where you are today. You'd think it would be easier with social media, but I think social media has this weird tendency to also maybe sometimes make it a little harder, because you just want to turn it off. I mean, a lot of the times I throw my phone to the side and I leave it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I leave my apartment without it, so I don't have to deal with it. Yeah, but I miss all of you.
Hannah says you're successful, not a bad thing. We are proud, and that's true. Simo's very proud of you. All of the people, you didn't leave us behind. We're still part of your community. So
I didn't mean to get sappy. No, I definitely, I miss you all though, very, very much. Yeah, I can't, if I could be your spokesperson for the end of time, of how like awesome it is to go to school at SEMO, I would do it. Actually, I talk about you all the time in my own circles in Texas, and I use a lot of things that I learned actually from there to kind of help build community with my own students, which is great. But
when you come in December, you have to go to the wall, because I don't know if you've heard, but Craig Thomas just finished a huge mural on the wall. Totally.
I did hear that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any images of it, but I'm excited. I'm excited to see it. I didn't know that he'd finished it.
You should friend him on
when it
Facebook.
started.
You should friend him on Facebook, because he's got a lot of stuff up there.
I don't even have a Facebook. Did you know that?
Oh, okay. I'll send you some images.
Okay, send me some images.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's really amazing.
I'd love to see it. What did he, was that on the, that's on the side not facing the river, right? Or is it the river facing side?
It's the river facing side. He got rid of the one that was there because it was so damaged and
Mhm.
started from scratch. It looks like an old postcard. It says "Welcome to Cape Girardeau," and it's got the welcome kind of in cursive, and then Cape Girardeau spelled out within the letters
Yeah,
are all kinds of iconic images from the city. So it's pretty cool
that's
to get.
that's ex that's exciting. I wonder too, from just a technical standpoint, I'm curious about how it's going to stand up to the flood, with potential flooding.
Yeah, exactly. Maria says, "Do you have any mural ideas you would like to do in Texas?"
Oh yeah, tons of them. A lot of my work revolves around like a really particular, like my fine art work revolves around a really particular kind of culture, like a 70s cowboy culture in film, as a basis. So I'm really interested in that and concepts of gender identity. And I feel like in Texas, like growing up in Missouri, I felt like I was saturated with that stuff, but in Texas, it is it is the culture, which is really interesting. I didn't think about that until I got here, but I really only had exposure to it through like my dad, through my father, and like his interested in cowboy movies and stuff like that. But here it's all over the place. So I wonder, like some of my ideas for a mural would be like reimagining like a modern cowboy, but one who's like really sensitive and sweet and you know cares about all these like socially conscious issues. That would be really interesting. I don't know if I think a place like Denton, Texas would be a place for that. But yeah, that's one idea I have. I actually keep a list. This is something I think everybody should do. Keep a little, like in my sketchbooks, I keep sketches that for whatever reason I can't do them. I will keep like a little tabulated list of things that I like that I can come back to later if I find the time to do it.
Hannah's got a question. She says, "How does your intimate sketchbook work contrast to the large mural work in your experience of it or otherwise?"
It feels completely different most of the time. I mean, the intimacy of a sketchbook is something that it's your private space. I mean, they're pretty much the counter opposites, really. It's your private space. It's a place where you can truly be vulnerable. You can say anything you want. You know that you don't have to show it to anybody. In some cases, it's your diary. It's a place to put your rawest thoughts and emotions, whether it be in the form of writing or some kind of visual format, like drawing. And I do that in my sketchbook. And it's not, and for me, it's also not a precious place. Like I hold it in high regard, but I'm also not afraid to experiment and get loose. That is not something I feel like I can do on a wall, specifically one that I've been commissioned to do something on. Really, any of my commission work, I feel like a limitation. Like I can't necessarily do everything that I want to do. I'm working on an oil painting right now that's a pretty standard portrait oil painting, that people tend to really like. And it's so different from my conceptual work as an artist. But I can do it, and it pays the bills to do stuff like that. But the contrast can be rather uninspiring. Like I love my sketchbook for the reason that I can just do anything that I wanted there. Uh, but maybe it's good that you have those limitations outside of the sketchbook. I don't know. It's nice to have a place to kind of be free and to do whatever you want. And then, kind of, I don't know. Yeah, I would say that felt like that was all over the place, but totally different experience, I think.
But I think what's interesting, you showed how you can have fun with the murals, and you did the collaborative pieces, and then just things
Mhm.
that you said earlier about having fun with even public art. I think that that's hugely important, like you said too, to give yourself that freedom. So I think that that may translate a little bit to to certain things. I know I'm an art historian, but I do make things, and sometimes the things that I make that I like the best are the ones that I just do for myself.
Yeah.
Um,
And,
so
and
yeah.
that's a tricky line because I think every work that is truly good, is truly I'm gonna say good, that's a loaded word. Work that I think is successful historically has some kind of edge to it that feels personal. All the ones at least that I really like all the ones that I think of that come to mind have some kind of personal edge, some kind of authenticity, some honesty to it. And yeah, and a sense of play. And it's hard sometimes when you're in the real world and you're trying to appease people, because we do that a lot as artists, I think, where we will sacrifice certain ideas and visions to kind of create something that will be liked or that the person will like, that you sacrifice some of that. I mean, when I was doing the murals for fun with my friends, when we were doing collaborative murals, the nice thing about that is that we knew that it didn't really matter what we did, because it was probably someday it's going to get painted over. Like it wasn't, we did it legally in a space. Like it's not like we went in and did it illegally. I don't condone that. There are plenty, unless you're making like a political statement, that I totally condone that. But no, that's the thing. We knew that. So going in, like we didn't even think about like, how are we going to have fun? Because fun was the whole point of it. And it's that constant balance of trying to get that in. The nice thing, why I like the mural I did at Indie House, is because Lori and I connected right away, just as people. Like that's something that I feel like is sometimes really hard to manufacture. You can't really manufacture those types of connections. And right away we had a good working relationship, and because of that, there's just as much of me within that mural as there is Lori, and I think the community at large. And that's something that is hard to do. It's difficult to do, like just about anyone with the right training can make a slick image. You can make a nice image that looks really good, that's got all the bells and whistles, but to create something that has some meaning that's a bit more intimate is like one of the hardest things to do, I think.
Well, that's a really good segue into Leah's question. She asks, do you think murals or public works are equally received in small or large towns? Have you seen a difference in reception?
Yeah, small towns, they're much more not important. They have more weight in small towns, I think, because when something like that happens in a small town, everybody feels it. Everybody notices when something like that goes up. I've seen murals go up in larger spaces, larger urban areas, like in Columbus or Cleveland or Chicago or St. Louis. And sometimes they get totally overlooked. You don't even know that they're there, which is crazy because there's just so much noise in the city. There's so many people. There's community, but those communities are small and specific. And so that's the interesting thing. It might, like a mural in a larger space in a larger city is probably going to be really important, or it's going to make a huge impact on the people within a certain square mileage of the site. Like the people that see it every day, that go past it when they drive to work, or they walk by it when they go to the park with their kids, like it's going to affect them. But in a small town, it affects everybody because everyone can see it. There's really no place for that piece of art to hide.
Yeah, it becomes a landmark, really.
It becomes a landmark.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have any questions for Terry?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Yeah.
Joshua.
My drawing 3 class is hopefully going to do a mural this March at the Southeast Behavioral Hospital here in town. Terry, would you like to come up and teach that for me?
Wow, that's
He's got nothing else to do.
offer.
I was hoping, in all reality, I was hoping that, because this is such a good kind of talk, I was hoping maybe like either we could steal this recorded version and I could play it for my students, or you would be willing to talk to me sometime over break early next semester and we can just kind of
I would,
streamline it a little bit so you can just zoom into my class and they can talk to somebody who really knows what they're talking about with respect to murals,
well,
because I was just gonna fake it.
well, I
And
don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, I will say I had a failed collaborative experience, and failed not because I couldn't make it happen, but because literally it was. I mean, it was affected by COVID. So as soon as COVID became a thing, the pandemic became a thing. I had planned this entire murals course that I talked about, and I did all the work for that up front, and then it was just kaput. There was nothing. We couldn't do it. So what it ended up being was, more of a conversation about, it was much more, I guess, fake than I wanted it to be. They still made concepts and we still had discourse about it, but they had no real practical knowledge. But I remember there was a lot of work in the setup, a lot of work that my students didn't see, like especially with the high school. So I worked with the high school. I worked with another entity that was local. They were pretty simple. I worked with the heads of that department, and we kind of came up with the logistics, like how much they were willing to budget for the project, what themes they were interested in, whatever, and but for the school, it was a whole different thing, because there was a community of students there who I needed to kind of warm up to. They needed to know who I was. So for like 2 months, I would go, periodically I would go to the school, I'd get to know the teacher there, and I would talk to the students, and I gave presentations, and we would talk about this project. And I did all that to try to create some kind of community environment where it would be safe for everybody to work together, to ask questions with each other, to just for it to make sense for them. Because I feel like without that, it gets really kind of weird, and it's hard to have any kind of sense of agency, or to make things work. I don't know in your situation, Josh, but yeah, I think that was the hardest part for me. Again, I didn't really get to the point where I had a plan for organizing all of it. I unfortunately didn't get to actually implement those plans. But if you ever want to talk about it, or if you want me to talk to your class on certain things, I'm happy to. That sounds like a lot of fun.
yeah, both would be fantastic. I mean, I think ours is going to be like a month-long project. We'll spend a couple weeks coming up with the idea and then a couple weeks executing it. Ours are going to be a little bit easier than some of the projects you have done. Ours is a long wall, but it's about 4 feet tall. It's on concrete. It's outside, but I think it'll be doable, and I'm excited about it. But I would definitely appreciate your expertise, and would love to have you kind of zoom into our class and just kind of share your experiences with the students. I think that'd be fantastic. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I would be happy to. That sounds like a lot of fun. Let me know, and I'll be, yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'll reach out sometime over break and then we can try and set some things up. But thank you, Terry. It's fantastic. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. That sounds like fun.
And Josh, we are recording this too, so if you want the link, I can give that to you as well.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Anybody else have any questions for Terry? Well, I want to thank you I know this is a crazy time for everyone. And so thank you so much for, giving your time to us today. And we appreciate you. Hannah wants you to call her, and she says, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Leah says, thanks. Good to see you. So everybody's really happy to see you, as am I. So thanks again. And obviously we're going to see more of you. So that's awesome. We also have, by the way, in March, we're having a graffiti and street art exhibition at Catapult, where we're actually going to be, Justin, we're actually going to be drawing on the walls. I think you know about this, Leah, hopefully. Yeah, we'll be doing, big graffiti pieces in Catapult. So yeah, that'll be
That's exciting.
that'll coincide with Josh's project as well. So anyway, we don't want to, like stretch you too thin because I know you got a ton of stuff to do, but thank you for
No,
your generosity.
it sounds like fun. I mean, stuff like that is like, I like doing that stuff, you know? It's like a weird break from some of the other things maybe I don't want to do. So yeah, that sounds great. If anything, it would be me kind of procrastinating to not do like something else that, but no, I'd love to do that. That sounds like a lot of fun. That's going to be that's March.
Yeah,
You're going to have that?
March. Yeah.
All right.
I'll
I mean,
send-
it would
I
also
can
give
send-
me,
I'll send you specifics about exact dates and stuff.
Okay.
And I just
Yeah,
sent
it
you
would
the
also,
blurb too.
okay. I mean, something like that also just gives me the excuse to come and visit family too.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I can make it like a long, like a half week or a long weekend thing, which would be awesome.
Cool. All
Okay.
right, Terry. Thank you so much. Good luck with grading. And yeah, everyone says come visit. We want to see you. So yeah, you have family here too.
I'll come visit soon. All right, bye.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to everybody who came and who zoomed in. Thanks to all of you for being part of this. And see y'all soon. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Bye.
Bye.